I first met Lara Land at a book signing in New Jersey. It was on the day her book, Trauma Sensitive Yoga: How to Create Safer Spaces for All, became available. When I listened to her talk about her experiences and what led her to create this trauma sensitive awareness and education in the wellness community, I could feel her passion, maybe even a sense of duty or obligation as a yoga teacher to help make people aware of what someone who is traumatized experiences and how people in the yoga and wellness communities can create a space and practices to help them reconnect with themselves and create a new normal. I feel that Lara is a visionary leader in the world of trauma sensitive practices, and with her empathy and understanding and collaborative spirit, she will help create a lasting impact. Welcome, Lara.
Oh, thank you, visionary. I don't know, but thank you so much. Thank you. And it was very meaningful and memorable meeting you. I can't believe it's been
In a
almost a
year.
year. Yeah.
Yeah, your book came out, and I think I was one of the first people that jumped on to come and see you in person and to hear your story in person, and I'm
Mm.
grateful for that. And I got to meet your family and everyone too, so it was kind of cool. So I would like to just start asking questions, if that's okay with you. Yeah,
Let's do it.
great. Okay. Um, so I guess my first question is for so my audience becomes more acquainted with you is what led you to become interested in trauma sensitive yoga and how has it impacted your own life?
Sure. Well, from a very young age, I just knew I wanted to be a helper. I didn't know how I was going to do that, but I was always looking for what I could do that suited me, that would be like healing and helpful to the world. And in college, I discovered that yoga was really this transformative practice for me, integral to understanding myself, um, to to healing myself, and to being less reactive in my relationships. And I definitely started to see that that was going to be my path. And and I started going to India. And on my second trip to India, this was later, my late 20s, I had an opportunity to go to Rwanda and work with genocide survivors and their children, sharing yoga with them. And so I said, okay, well, this is definitely in alignment with, this sort of ongoing mission statement throughout my life. Let's do it. And that really set my future course. I think that was the pivotal moment.
Yeah. I find that there's no coincidences in this world, that we're on a path and the universe guides us to where we need to go. And the universe guided you to Rwanda. And I remember you telling the story in person. And I just thought it was just so pivotal, for you and to help create this message and as a starting point. Um, so if you can just define in a way the trauma, what trauma is, and explain then what trauma sensitive yoga is and how it differs from traditional yoga practices.
Sure. Well, so we have different life events that happen to us, or they can happen to also our ancestors and get passed down. And two people can have the same event happen to them, and because of whatever circumstances, there are many different circumstances, right? Like access to resources, ability to react and get away from that event, our DNA, our actually our muscle twitching fibers, like so many different circumstances that can determine if we're able to process that event, if it goes through the normal channels of processing. And really, that has to do with how it goes through the brain and how we create a memory of it. We're able to talk about it, versus an event that is basically too much, or events that are too much for the system. So it doesn't have to be a singular event, it could be chronic. And basically, like, I think of it as it's too much for the system. It's too much,
Mhm.
electricity running through the system. And so the system, our nervous system, has to adapt, right? Adapt, or it wouldn't be able to handle it. So it does this amazing, it finds new ways of processing or holding or storing the event. And there's sort of this adaptive, protective quality that happens. And it's actually quite brilliant, right? The the way that our body is so smart and protects us. Um, and at the same time, these adaptations can later be, detrimental to relationships in life, um, to sleep, to being able to relax, and so forth. So this thing that helps us survive in the moment later on creates this ongoing traumatic adaptation that some people choose to live with, and might feel very strongly that they need, and some folks see that is not serving them and they want to be rid of.
Mm. So you say the word later, and you're talking, I was thinking that so a traumatic event can happen at any time. It can happen when you're a child, like an accident or you fall and something happens, you hit your head, and then maybe you're able to deal with it at that time, not realizing the impact on the nervous system, or maybe you can regulate it well. And then maybe something is dormant and that can be triggered later on in life. Would you say that you've seen that something happens in a childhood and then something triggers in
Yeah,
adulthood and it happens and
yeah.
yeah, and it
So, one thing we know about traumatic memories, they're not stored the same. So there might not be a memory of the event, but something could trigger it later where the memory surfaces.
mm,
Or the memories might be very sensory, not linear. So often folks don't have a good like cognitive story of what's happened, and sometimes building that through line, understanding what happened is part of the healing. So yeah, many different things that can happen, and that's actually one of the things about trauma is it's unique to each individual.
right. And it's I guess I don't know if spectrum is the right word, but it's different and there's different degrees or degrees of trauma and how people experience trauma. It could be very, you know, or the characteristics of what a person goes through. So, for example, like if you could tell us, like, what are some of the things that people experience who experience trauma? Like
Yeah.
hypervigilance, I've heard is one of them, right?
Oh, sure. So some of the things that we might see in someone that's in a trauma response, well, hypervigilance would definitely be one. So that's going to be, being on the alert, always looking behind, um, a very quick startle response. So
Mm,
really jumping at a small sound, right? Something that maybe someone else would just, of a horn wouldn't bother you, might not even hear it, right? That person might hear. Um, and that hypervigilance is going to cause those sleep problems, really inability to relax, maybe shifting all the time, darting around, etc. And then there's also the other side, which is hypovigilance. And usually people have both because eventually the nervous system becomes very tired, right, from being on high alert. It's a lot of energy expenditure. And at that point, it tends to shut off. And so that side of the trauma response is more of a numbing, disassociation,
mm,
zoning out, feeling disconnected from one's life, um, almost viewing life from the outside, um, and not experiencing much in the way of like connection or feeling.
yeah. And not being aware that there's something like trauma sensitive yoga where they can learn how to reconnect with their bodies. They'll find other ways in order to self soothe, right? And those ways could be um, habits that are not healthy, like smoking or drinking, or maybe overindulging in certain foods, things like that, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I think as with, many of us, probably all humans, we um especially, if we're not able to deal with uncomfortable sensations um in the body, then we will find ways to soothe, like you said, self-soothe. Those can be um, as innocuous as like Netflix,
Right, I didn't
um,
think of that.
I eating ice cream carton, or definitely there's a strong connection between substance use disorder and trauma.
Right.
Absolutely. Um, and other
Yeah.
things like, soothing could be perfectionism, having everything under control, right? Needing to know every second of the day what's happening. It's the more that we're aware of these things, the more, if we come across someone like that, we might not immediately go to, gosh, they're so controlling, but we might think, wow, that person really has a strong need, right, to have control of every detail. I wonder, where that's coming from. Just like
Mm,
approaching with more curiosity than judgment or thinking it's about us. And that's why I feel like everyone should have trauma sensitivity training, because it just makes us so much more aware and empathetic to why people are the way they are.
absolutely. I was going to ask you that later on. I'm glad you said that early on. I also believe the same. Um, Thank you for saying that. So let's talk about how how does trauma sensitive yoga address the unique needs and experiences of these individuals who have experienced trauma?
Oh, well, it's such a big one. Um,
We can break it
so
down.
trauma sensitive yoga, oh yeah, there's a lot to say there. So one of the core fundamentals of trauma sensitive yoga is creating as much safety in the space as possible. So I mean, that alone is like a whole topic, right? A whole chapter in
Right.
the book is how to do that. And there's the setting up of the room in a way. We talked about hypervigilance. Folks might need to be near a door or see a door. There's things like that that are really important. So the room's going to be set up in a way that is safe as possible for a survivor. And another a key component of trauma is the agency that's taken away from the individual, when that act or acts happens to them. Choice becomes diminished. So we often talk about the flight, fight, or freeze responses. There are other ones, but these are the biggest ones. I mean, ultimately, freeze is really the most extreme response, and it happens when a person is like kind of toggling between flight and fight, and there really is no answer. They can't get away. They're powerless to fight, and the body goes into a complete freeze. And that's really um, the ultimate expression of a loss of agency, right? And when I talk about a freeze, you physically cannot move. So there's also a lot of folks that go into freeze response, which is a natural evolutionary response that animals, all types of animals, including
Mm,
including us human animals, go through. Um, it has nothing to do with a choice of not doing anything, right? But there's often a lot of victim blaming and a lot of shame, like why couldn't I run? Why couldn't I fight harder? And I say this, and all to get back to your question, is when any practice, and there are lots of great practices for trauma survivors. There's dance, and journaling. I'm getting into therapeutic trauma sensitive journaling, but any kind of practice, agency, choice, power has to be restored to the survivor. And um, because of the dissociation that we spoke about, there it can be, or because of years of complex trauma where a person's choices were monitored, or they were told like this is what you like. It can take a lot of restoration to find out like what feels good in my body and what feels right for me. And it can feel really overwhelming to even start to explore that. But that is the process of trauma sensitive yoga. So the teacher, and I even hesitate to say teacher, the facilitator, is really facilitating exploration and choice within the practitioners, and they're exploring shapes and movement. These are the things that we explore with our bodies in asana yoga and the physical practice of yoga. Um, but it's not like you would see in a quote unquote regular yoga class where a teacher might stand up front and tell everyone what to do and they
Mm.
follow along.
Yeah, there's different, I guess, I know I was going to ask you actually the different types of language that's used, and um, some poses may or may not be, or shapes may not be used because it may trigger some uh, reaction of people that have been maybe sexually abused or anything like that. So there's a lot of components to teaching trauma sensitive yoga. Um, and I was going to actually, that was my next question here. If you can share just some specific techniques or practices that are used to create a safe and supportive environment. And in your book, which by the way, I'm going to definitely share a link because that book is fantastic. I love your book. You talk about Tristana. If you can
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
tell us what that
So,
is.
yeah, the Tristana, I think, trauma sensitive Tristana is, I think, something when I look at the work that I've done, I've been influenced by, so many different teachers in trauma sensitivity, mindfulness, and yoga. But pulling in the Tristana, which is specific to my background in the Ashtanga tradition, is something a little bit unique to my own experience that I really pulled into this trauma sensitive work. So I'm glad that you pointed that out, and that it is something different about my book. So the Tristana, which is a three-pointed focus, it brings in the focus of the gaze point. So resting the eyes on a point that's sometimes the tip of the middle finger or the thumb in yoga. It can be looking down at the big toe. It can be behind you, especially in a twist, and this can be very helpful for the nervous system and hypervigilance because you have a chance to look behind you. So the one of the points of the Tristana is this gaze. So we can focus on our gaze point in the practice. Um, for folks that are in a trauma response, it might be typical to start going into the past, reliving painful memories, or having anxiety about the future. So, practices which are grounding and bring us into the here and now, like, gazing at that plant across the room, can be really settling for the nervous system. So, we bring that into the practice. There's also the embodiment, the feeling of being in the shape, which is very, very helpful and important for trauma survivors, is to start feeling the fullness of their bodies in space, awakening sensation again, especially where there might be some numbness or disconnection, and feeling like the presence and the weight and the space taking up space. You'll see, especially in the beginning, a lot of survivors don't want to take up space in the room. They've learned to become small. One of the trauma responses that we don't talk about as much is like camouflaging. So before maybe something escalates or during a chronic complex trauma, folks might try to hide, make themselves small, like if you don't see me, or they might try to appease. And so it's important to let the practitioners know that um, we as the facilitators, we don't have a preference of whether they do the posture this way or that way. We really are wanting them to find their own preference. So that's the body shape. And then there's the breath, and breath can be, as I believe most things are, and I guess, come up with this, but I thought I did. But it's like an old, old, philosophical knowledge that, a little bit of poison makes the medicine. It's all about dosage. So I forgot who said it first, but I really do believe in that. The things that trigger us are also the things that heal us. But we just have to work with them very slowly. And breath is kind of like that. For some people, focusing on breathing, I mean, breathing, we know, is typically a very essential part of yoga asana. If you go to yoga class, the teacher could talk a lot about breath. Some do, some don't. Some introduce a lot of different breathing exercises, some which are can be very triggering. Here, there is some just noticing that we are breathing. Now, the Tristana, as taught in the Ashtanga tradition, all three of these are kind of unified. So we're attempting to focus on all three at once: gaze, embodiment, and breath. Um, where I've sort of adapted that for trauma sensitive yoga is this actually gives the practitioner a chance to be in posture. They can change their focus. So if they're being triggered by feeling the feelings in the body, put the mind and attention on the gaze point, and you'll see that folks can stay, they, instead of running out of the room, can actually stay in the posture because they can put their focus somewhere else. If the breath is triggering but the body is grounded, move the focus to the body. So it allows folks, a lot of times, when teachers don't know how to work with survivors, they'll just say, you can just do something else. Like they don't have enough options to give their students to stay in the room. And sometimes it just takes, you don't have to focus on breathing to allow that student to stay in the room and have a positive experience. And we know yoga is so healing and so powerful. We really don't want folks to have a negative experience, especially maybe their first time. Maybe a therapist said, go do yoga, and they just go to a class and there's all this breath work and they start to have a panic attack.
Right.
That can happen.
Right. Or be told they need to go into a shape or pose, and that could be triggering because they can't, or they're trying comparing themselves to someone else who's doing it and they can't do it. So there's a lot, and that's a lot of the power behind the language. And
Yes.
as a yoga teacher, because I did take some training, and it's a reconditioning of how you were taught initially to present the information, to conduct a class. But once you acquire that knowledge of how to express yourself as a teacher, and that any student, no matter what class, has choices, right? Because we can't force anybody to do anything, then you're reconditioned to speak that way more often, and it becomes more natural. But it takes work for a yoga teacher, right?
Yes.
Just like it takes work for someone who's coming into your class who's had trauma. It takes work and practice as a yoga teacher as well, and that's where your classes and your book can benefit teachers because
Yes.
yeah,
I
yeah.
would
Go ahead.
say one of the hardest things is the language, like you're talking about. That are a lot of teachers do come to me and they say, "Oh my gosh, I feel like I just have to relearn everything, and everything I've been doing has been wrong." But and it's great when I can catch them earlier in their training, and those like neural pathways aren't
Yes,
so like deeply. But it's normal to feel like that when we're learning something new and we have an awakening, like whoa, yeah, like it's a big awakening that there's a huge difference in saying, reach your hand up, and if it's feeling right for you in this moment, you might try reaching your hand up.
right,
And it is like eye awakening when you go through one of my trainings, when you realize how much trauma is in every shared space. Because there's so much trauma in every quote unquote regular yoga classroom, or any sports team, or any business, any company. So I think it's okay to be a little bit like, whoa, and then and then you follow that with some gentleness. Like, I'm new at this. I'm gonna incorporate one skill this week. This week I'm just gonna focus on Tristana. This week I'm just gonna focus on making my language a little more invitational. I always tell people, And that's why the book, I think it's great because it's really a manual that you come back to. Like the book's meant to really be picked up, put down, put some notes on the side. There's big margins. Don't try to take it all at once, but use it throughout years, of your life, I think.
Yeah, have post-it notes all over. And
Yeah.
that's what I love about that you have white space. You created intentionally the white space. So it's like something you put in your teaching bag and you bring it
Yeah.
with you because there's a lot of amazing information. And I really feel that, I can go on a thing here, but I really feel that yoga instructors, this should be required in all yoga teacher training. I honestly think that. Yeah.
Thank you. I mean, I do feel that some kind of trauma sensitivity training should be in every yoga teacher training. I mean, you're working with people's breath, bodies, nervous system. You can definitely do harm. And there's just with just a little bit of training, you can
Yeah.
prevent a lot of harm. So I think the payoff is so great.
Yeah. I mean, just inviting some of that different language and really being aware as a teacher. One of the one you I was reading your book, or I've read your book, I was rereading your book, and you talk about I'm going to just quote here. One of the things you write in your book is that one of your purposes or intention through teaching trauma informed yoga practices is to break the cycle of hurt people hurting people, and that it's important for us to recognize the pain within us and to heal that first. So even as yoga teachers, we may recognize some of these patterns within us. And once we recognize that, then we're better able to be compassionate towards the people in our class. Oh, and I'm getting tingles as I'm saying that because
Oh,
that
yeah.
really, hit a chord with me because that's so important. You just can't go in as a teacher and just start to spew out, you know, cues here and there. It's just you want to create a space where people it's their class.
Yeah, you captured it. And, we talked about creating as safe a space possible. And the first part of that is making ourselves safe for
Yeah,
other people. And we're not safe for other people until we do that inner investigation.
yeah,
Um, because we can have biases we don't see, we can have our own stuff that makes us unsafe, to other people.
yeah. And we talked earlier about there's different ways a person can become traumatized, and we can't pinpoint all of them, but there's you've created a framework in which yoga teachers can use in order to help, well, first help themselves become a better teacher, but really make a difference in someone's life.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I think it's great. um let's talk about how let's talk about your training program and how a yoga instructor does become trained, and maybe just kind of work through high level some of your methodology or what you provide in your training.
Sure. So I do trainings through a couple different ways. One way is getting invited to yoga studios, retreat centers, to provide this training. Um, Often it's specific for yoga teachers. So, I mean, so many yoga studios have those 200-hour yoga teacher trainings, or 500 hours. So sometimes I get invited to do a kind of add-on training, 20-hour. It's usually about 15 to 20 hours over a weekend.
Mm.
So I don't know when this is going to air, but I have a few of those coming up.
Yes,
Um,
I saw that. I think this will air before the Omega one, actually.
okay, so
So
yeah,
which
Omega's
will be in
in.
August. Yeah.
That's a fantastic place. I don't
Oh
know
my
if you've
gosh,
been.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So just going there is very healing for me. So I've been there as a student, and I'm thrilled to go there as a teacher. And some versions of the training I do are more like open to non-yoga teachers. So I did one at Kripalu last year that was for healers. It was really for therapists, and trauma survivors, and I had mainly therapists who were trauma survivors. It was pretty intense, but very special. But mostly I do them for yoga teachers, and I also do them through my nonprofit, 3.5 Acres Yoga. So the nonprofit was created to bring trauma sensitive yoga to populations that experience trauma. So we partner with um, like shelters, domestic abuse centers, food banks, and other places that people go for services. And we add yoga to the services that they're already receiving. Um, so most of those centers don't have yoga, but then we come and now folks that are going there for maybe resume or job training or group therapy, now they also get yoga. And when we started doing that, we realized that's kind of when I realized that yoga teachers weren't trained for this. And so we started doing the training. So that training is online, which is cool. For people can do it from the comfort of their home.
Right.
And I bring on guest teachers. So we have one of those in September.
Oh, yeah, there was the virtual one, right? Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, and I like that, although you call it trauma sensitive yoga, anybody in any capacity or fitness or wellness or even caregivers or people in relationships with people who have experienced trauma can take your course and really understand more about. I mean, even just the terminologies. I'm doing the research. There's so many words. I mean, I can create a lexicon of some terminology that is associated with the trauma sensitive environment or awareness. So, um, and you're hearing more and more about it, about people who are in narcissistic or toxic relationships experiencing trauma, or children who have been abused. And I was thinking of people who are older, let's say in their 50s or 60s or 70s, that experience trauma as a young person or even in their early life, who may not be comfortable saying that they are
Yeah.
experiencing these um or being triggered and are experiencing all that they experience because of the trauma. Do you find that, or have you been coming across that, and more people maybe coming out for therapy or for yoga even? Because there's like a
Yeah.
stigma, you know.
Yeah. I think, trauma is getting more, the word is out there more, and more people are comfortable talking about it. But also, as you're, I think, alluding to, maybe some of the older generation, not as much. And we also find that, I mean, there's plenty of people of all ages that are like, that's not me, or don't want to be identified with that label.
Yeah.
So sometimes with our classes at, these community centers or wherever they are, like we won't even call it trauma sensitive yoga. You have a problem with trauma, you have a problem with yoga too, because yoga has its own,
Right.
thing that a lot of people do not feel. That's also some of the work we do in the training, is like dissecting, what is yoga really, and what are some of the commercial images that have been put in your mind as a yoga teacher that you're, perpetuating,
Right.
maybe without wanting to. So we do quite a deep dissection. But sometimes you can't even call things yoga because people feel like, oh, that's for skinny people, that's for stretchy
Yeah.
people, that's not for me.
It's very woo
Um,
woo, or
yeah,
yeah, it's
yeah.
spiritual. And yeah, I don't want to
You're gonna
chant.
exactly,
Right.
exactly.
Right. Right.
I'm this real. I'm certain religions. So
Right.
yeah, sometimes part of my mission has always been also to really change the face of that, by how I market my programs and the people that we've tried to elevate to positions of power, being, all body types, and just so that folks can see like leadership that looks like them, and not, you know, think there's just one vision of yoga.
Even in your book, some of the models, the beautiful models in your book, come in all shapes and sizes, and they've been through. things themselves and may not look like your perfect model, but they are
Yes.
beautiful models representing just humans in all
Yes.
shapes and sizes.
Yes.
Yeah, I was thinking about one of the things I was thinking about because I revert back to the younger generation because the younger generation are going to experience their own types of trauma, whether it's COVID or whether it's too much too much gaming, the
Yeah.
digital environment, body shaming which is another one, oppression. There's so many that I think that there's this doorway that can lead to helping early on the younger
Hmm.
generation,
Yeah.
you know. So
Yeah. You know,
hopefully.
yeah, yeah, hopefully.
Mhm.
I know I have a little one, and I we do yoga together, and
Right.
um you have to introduce these things at the appropriate way for their age and development, but just understanding how feelings move through the body, and um getting them out.
Yeah.
um some of those ideas are really great for young people to have,
Yeah.
just to notice, like, to even be able to notice, I've been sitting here staring at this screen so long, like it doesn't feel good in my body. That noticing really is um, the impetus for change. But if we can't even, if we don't even have the tools to notice how we're feeling, then we're in a lot of trouble.
Yeah. And I know now we're going to go back to, I was just thinking in the class setting in teaching yoga to anybody, bringing their awareness to how they're feeling in the present moment is really important, whether or not you've been through
Yeah,
trauma or not. So,
yeah,
um, yeah, and that really is truly helpful in healing just the whole mind, body, spirit. And once people can sense that connection, they're better able to be their own medicine, for lack of a better word, or healer. So truly important that there's a lot of there's a lot of somatic talk and a lot of somatic yoga or somatic therapy that I'm seeing more and more of, and it's kind of in alignment with what you teach as well, right? When you move into a pose or a shape, notice how it feels in the body, if it feels right or if it doesn't feel right, just tuning that awareness in and allowing
it's
for that to
it's
happen.
exactly it's
Yeah,
exactly what it is. It's, once we get into this shape, what's it for, right? It's noticing. And if uncomfortable sensations are there, sort of beginning to identify, do they stay? Do they pass? How much should I stay for this? Should I come maybe in and out of the posture? So we use different practices than you might see again in kind of standard, like stay in it for this long, but um, sometimes it's moving in and out of the shape and seeing if that helps to regulate the nervous system. And there's a lot of parallel there with with life, and going into intensity and coming away from it, and how that regulates our nervous system, and how we can learn to not maybe shut off, or you know go straight into something, but finding maybe that middle path,
yeah,
and growing more resilience, growing more ability to handle uncomfortable feelings, but also knowing when it's a sharp pain, or the feelings are something that I'm not up for today. And just watching how that plays out in the body day after day in yoga, it just teaches us so much about ourselves. And none of the choices are wrong, right? Or should be complimented or shamed.
yeah,
It's really an exploration of self,
yeah.
knowing oneself.
I was first I first took yoga 30 years ago after I was in a toxic relationship at the time and experiencing a lot of joint pain, which I didn't realize it was a manifestation of going through that toxic relationship.
Okay.
And I drove a half hour to go to yoga yoga class because there were no yoga classes in New Jersey back in the early 90s. And I remember going consistently, and the joint pain went away. And then I started feeling more empowered and more feeling like I did have choices. So,
Mm.
it's just having that exposure and that awareness at the time. And I was in my 30s, in my early 30s, and experience. I couldn't even walk. I remember, and I would go to this class, and little by little it was a hatha yoga class, but it was very slow, you know, gentle. Um, really changed my life, and
Well, thank you for sharing that.
yeah,
And
it's
yeah,
so anyone out there that is experiencing anything on any level that is uncomfortable within their bodies to try something new that hopefully will, even if they're not um eh, they don't experience trauma or haven't experienced trauma, just to even try yoga to see if it helps them with their pain or coping with what is
yeah,
going on in their lives. Yeah, it's so
yeah.
powerful.
Chronic pain is, a big symptom of trauma. And, you don't have to even know what the experience was. It's sometimes nice when you can identify it, right? And you can make that change. But as you said, if you're experiencing any kind of chronic pain, just yoga can be very healing. Of course, it was good that you found a good class and the right, good teachers. Like it's, I think, more and more important. That was, as you said, at a time that there wasn't so much. Now there's so much out there. So I always encourage people to do a little bit of research and ask questions. Can I leave if I want to? Can I, do I have to? Yeah, just those questions that you can get a sense if that teacher is um, how trauma sensitive they are if they don't have something on their bio or that says that they are. So that, we just want people to have a good experience. But I
Experience.
think, yeah, what you shared is it's very truthful for a lot of people. And then I also love how you shared, getting through that your own self, right? You figured out how to heal yourself with the help of the community, of the class, and of the teacher. And that was really empowering for you. And that's exactly the experience that we're going for, and, in my classes and in my trainings, right? It's like you walked away like with not just, okay, yoga or even a kind of healing that came from the teacher, but you saw how you experienced that for yourself, and you were an integral part of your own healing. And I think that's what builds a lot of strength and the confidence to, um, get out of a bad situation or slowly make better choices. And that's so
Yeah.
important for survivors.
It's really all about making choices and being able to make those choices for yourself. It's your
Yes,
birthright to
yes,
to live your best life. Yeah.
yes.
Um, how do you envision the future of trauma sensitive yoga? What are some of the potential? I think we spoke about some, youth, but some of the potential areas for growth and development in this field.
Yeah, I mean, I still think I I'm always shocked that every yoga teacher training isn't doing a unit on this yet.
Yep.
So we still have a really big ways to go with that. It was seriously shocking. Like I should be I should be traveling every weekend, to do these trainings. They should be at every single yoga teacher training. So that's weird.
Yep.
That's very strange, actually.
Yeah.
So I hope in the future that's what's happening. I think um, I hope it's so pervasive that every every teacher has some of this training, and even if their class isn't completely trauma informed, they're at least doing some basic things because we know survivors are in every room, every shared space. So they're not wearing a sign or a label, and they're in every quote unquote regular yoga class. So, hopefully teachers are just a little bit more aware, and it's popularized enough that they're at least not shaming anyone in class, which unfortunately, happens a lot, not forcing people to do pose that they don't want to do, or complimenting the folks that have naturally flexible bodies so other people feel poorly around them, not making people close their eyes, you know,
Touching people.
basics, touching people,
Yeah, we
going
didn't talk about
behind
that, going
someone.
behind. Yeah, we didn't talk about that. That's a key component of your training or trauma sensitive training.
Yeah. Yeah, we don't we don't touch any of our students. It's not the practice isn't based around forming some idealized version of the shape. It's really exploration. So there's no need for me to fix you, or put
Right.
you into any kind of shape that I've seen. It's more about the parts of yoga. I mean, yoga has many definitions, um, found in many ancient texts, and um, they're usually about self knowledge, um, artfulness of
Self-study.
action,
Mm,
self
right.
study. Asana, the pose, is just a small part of it, and it's a great way in because we're here manifested in bodies, so we can learn a lot from getting in touch with our bodies. Just not to downplay this physical experience, which I think is a beautiful and powerful one. A lot of traditions say that angels are jealous of us because we get to, really physicalize our experience. So, but it shouldn't be the focus. shouldn't shouldn't be the physical. It should be how we can use this embodied nature to grow and learn.
Yeah. A quick story of a friend who was teaching a class for veterans. And it was a very small group of people. And I was there to observe her first class. And there were people, there were only a few, some were able to do things. One in particular person, of course, I won't say names, he came in a wheelchair and he sat in a chair and was doing things. And then I guess a few months later, the next thing I saw him was at a traditional yoga class at a studio. It was at the YMCA, and was a participant. And I'm like, "Isn't that so and so?" And he was there doing Yin yoga. He progressed so much, and he was a smoker, and he quit smoking, and he just changed his whole demeanor, his perspective, his attitude, his energy was so
Hmm.
different and so beautiful, you know?
Yeah, that's beautiful. I mean, that's another thing about the yoga practice, and I have it a little bit in the book, is that like it goes again to what I was saying. Like, it's a beautiful story because it really relates to when we start to feel sensations in the body again, it changes our choices, right? When you're numbed out, you don't really notice like a cigarette affecting you. But when you start to practice yoga, you notice like, oh, if I drank the night before, I don't feel as good,
Right.
so it does impact all these other life decisions. And you know, when you're feeling stronger, when you're feeling more connected to yourself, to others, um, that becomes more addictive, right? You
Yeah.
like you
You
feel
feel
good
better.
and you feel better, and life looks different and possibilities open up. And there's a ton of studies around relaxation and creativity. So, what are we doing in yoga? We're
Yeah.
relaxing the muscles, and we're opening all this spaciousness in our way of thinking. And, trauma does the opposite. Stress and trauma are constricting.
Connecting.
Our thoughts become limited. We don't feel like we have any choice. Everything becomes binary. And this practice of stretching and breathing is very expansive, and it really impacts all parts of our lives. So powerful.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, he was able to walk. This was it's just a great story. I mean, this may or may not happen to, may not happen to everyone who tries it, but at least get your foot in the door. This I think this is yoga, and trauma sensitive yoga is like this like I said earlier, it's like this doorway or this passageway to creating this whole new almost normal. And normal is just this word that, you know I mean, it's just this whole new life for you that could to be so beautiful and happy, you know,
Yeah.
y-
Yeah,
and
absolutely. It's like
full of choices.
what's your baseline? Yeah.
Yeah.
It is have to do with like because the trauma response becomes normal and doing something different than that is what feels risky. So it is about readjusting what our normal is.
Yeah. And it's not something that happens right away. It takes time. I mean,
Yeah.
we're rewiring our brain, we're rewiring our nervous system, so many components. It's just
Yeah.
consistency and self-compassion will help us to get there and to walk that path. Um, where can listeners find more information about you and your work? I know you talked about a couple of uh, workshops. That you have your website,
Yeah.
laraland.us.
Laraland.us. Pretty much everything or everything is linked there. So you can find all my upcoming workshops. I also do some personal coaching. Um, and
Podcast.
I have a podcast
Yes.
too called Beyond Trauma, which I put, as you know, a lot of from doing your own, a lot of research and effort into. I have some
Yes.
incredible guests on there. Really proud of it. Please check it out. It has something for everyone.
Yes, it's great.
Um, yeah, and I'm most active on the Instagram. I would say that's probably the only like social media platform I'm really active on. Lara Land Yoga. Everything can be found on those places.
Yeah. Um, yeah, is there anything else you wanted to add before we wrap it up?
Well, I just wanted to thank you so much for having me. It's so beautiful how things come around. And I did a series of events last year when the book came out, but the one you attended was really my hometown event. So,
Yeah.
as you said, each event had a different flavor. I got to share a lot more of my personal story there, and there were a lot of family members there. It was in Montclair, and we had Jillian Pransky, who's
Yeah, Jillian was there.
another.
It was very special.
So it was very, very special, and I have a lot of gratitude for all the people involved in that event. And it's just beautiful to have this come full circle and to be on your show. What a blessing.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure, and was so excited that you agreed to be on the show. And I just wish you continued success. And like I said, you're just this visionary. You are a visionary, and I think that um, this will just continue to inspire many people, not just yoga teachers. But I have a feeling that more and more people are going to become more aware of your work and what you do, and it's going to be an integral part of all trainings, not just yoga training. So I want to thank you for being here, and I just want to end it by quoting something from your book, if I may. I love your
Okay.
book. Compassion can be cultivated through practices such as loving kindness, meditation, and self study, and deepening one's knowledge and of the experience of others. And as we come to understand ourselves and our desire to be loved and accepted, we begin to see how this desire is in everyone and at the root of what each of us says and does. As self compassion grows, so does our compassion for others and our sensitivity to what they are going through as they pursue their same human desires. We feel more intensely for the way others have been harmed. Developing this understanding of human nature and compassion for ourselves and others is critical to becoming effective healers and teachers. Once again, thank you so much. So blessed to have you on the
Mm,
show.
thank you. Thank you.